Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this Sunday for episode 4 of the Strat Talk with your host,
Hello.
myself, ADEX, AdexTrades. Hey, Zeus, how you doing? How you doing?
I'm doing good, and you?
Got you.
Good.
Doing well, doing well. Guys, glad that we can get you on board. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this Sunday for episode 4 of the Strat Talk with your host, myself, ADEX, AV OG Trades TA, Options Trooper, and Zeus Trades. In today's episode, we have Money Flow Mel of Black Box Stocks. She's here to discuss how she utilizes flow and dark pool activity in her trading. Although the title of the show is called The Strat Talk, we wanted to bring other traders and offer different perspectives and tools that can possibly help you succeed in your trading. For those of you that are new to the show, I am one of the admins of AdexTrades. I started trading before the pandemic started, and I've been trading the strat for almost 2 years. One of my goals as a leader of the group is teaching the strat to as many people as possible and to help others become self-sufficient traders. I'll now take it over to the other speakers of the panel so they can give a brief introduction of themselves as well. OG, would you like to go next?
Yes, I can. Sorry, you put me there on the spot. I was just enjoying this intro you had there. No, it's great. For those of you that are just tuning in, I'm OG Trades, newest member of the Sepia group, which is the original Strat community. So it's been awesome to be able to also impart some knowledge to the AdexTrades group. It's been a whirlwind year, doing great things. My background, as most of you know, I've been trading for the last 13 years. So I've been able to see all sorts of markets. And so with the ability to do these Sunday talks and, like Adex said, bring other people to the panel that don't necessarily just trade the strat, but you get different perspective. Because I was excited as soon as Adex told me that Mel was going to be speaking, because I have so many questions about flow. I have so many questions about those black box type things, because I've never used that in my trading. So this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for me to learn as well. It doesn't matter how many years you've been trading. I've been trading for 13 years, so I still learn new things every day. And if you're not growing as a trader, then you're not doing much of anything, and you need to hop on board and continue to learn. Don't think you ever know everything. So, all right, that's it for me. I'll toss it over to Abby.
What's up, everybody? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, hey everyone. My name is AB Trades, or Abisai, or AB, and I'm an options trader. I actively use the strat with a bits of other elements, and I'm one of the analysts on AdexTrades server. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to be doing this. And once again, Mel, like, I'm a huge fan. So the moment you responded to me, I started, I guess you could call it fangirling or whatnot, but it's really an honor for you. So I'm really excited.
No, and you guys don't know. You guys don't know. He really did. He really
did.
He was so on our Discord thread. He was like, "Oh my god!
I still got the messages.
Love it. Well, I'm glad you reached out. This is going to be fun.
Appreciate you for that brief introduction. Zeus, you want to give a little introduction on yourself?
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. I go by Zeus. I've been trading for about 3 years now, and recently became an analyst in AdexTrades community. I started out as an investor in 2019, then transitioned to options in fall of 2020. And I primarily used to be a flow trader, but transitioned to the strat as the market conditions changed.
Thank you, my guy. Appreciate it. And now on to our final panel member, Trooper.
Hello, everyone. I'm Trooper. Kind of back to what OG was saying. I'm constantly trying to learn and kind of adapting to the market environment. Right now, I'm primarily using strat and delta positioning, and pretty much strength and weakness to determine my plays as of right now.
Thank you, my guy. Appreciate it. So thank you to the other speakers of the panel for your introductions. Now we will be starting our event. Mel, thank you for being here. I know I speak for the audience members when we say that we appreciate you being here and taking the time out of your Sunday. For the listeners who don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. I am Money Flow Mel. I'm a moderator with Black Box Stocks. I exclusively trade options flow, but in general, I'm looking at just kind of everything that's coming in money flow wise. And that's why I like to be able to collectively take all the information that we're seeing, and that's going to include the activity that we're seeing in the dark pool transactions there, which is going to be your common shares as well as the options market. So I feel I get the best of both worlds, and I'm as close as I can possibly get to an inside view to what the larger market participants are active in and also what they are trading. And I do just want to side note that it is a pleasure to be here. I will say there's no community stronger than the Strat community. You guys are absolutely so supportive, so giving. With just all of your members. And it seems like if you talk to anybody that is a stratter, the number one thing that you hear first before anything else is just giving back to the community, helping the community. And I think that is just invaluable. You know, I will say that there is no right or wrong way to trade. It is going to be what works for you and what speaks to you. And I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit, because when I first started trading, and I've been trading for 5 years now, I've been with Black Box Stocks for 3 in July. I thought that the only way was that you had to have RSI and MACD and volume profile and fibs and moving averages and this and this. And I had a chart that was so bogged down and was so hard to read because I was not even really following the price action as much as I was trying to figure out what indicator was trying to tell me what thing, and a lot of confliction back and forth. And so all I kept hearing was price action, price action. You want price and volume, price and volume. And I finally had to just go back to roots, got rid of, all of the indicators and said, okay, what's really moving markets if it's price and volume? And I know that the markets are not controlled by retail, but by larger market participants. I really focused and honed in on where I can try to find that information. And that kind of led me down the path of tracking dark pools, and then also building a love for, options flow and being able to maneuver and manage through all of that information that comes through. And so I will say that that's where I start. I'm a money flow trader. I'm not running scans necessarily to see where there's MACD crossovers or anything else. I think I have enough to wrap my arms around with the information that I have. So I do like to pull in some different things. And I'd say probably the number one thing from the Strat community that I've learned that I really enjoy is those inside days. I really do love being able to catch those. It makes it simple, right? You're going to do this, or you're going to do this.
Loved it. I loved it.
Yep, it's either going to go up or down, right? You have this consolidation period. Now, what are you going to do? And then if you pair it with flow, I mean, it's even better. So I guess going off of that, for the newer folk, since we are a pretty large strat community, could you give a simple breakdown of, what flow is and why it is or can be a very superior tool to have in your arsenal?
Absolutely. So, and we have so many that are trading, options. It's a great way for retail traders, especially with small accounts, to be able to step away from some of the manipulation that occurs on penny stocks or your momentum names that are your lower cost, and be able to actually trade some of the blue chips, some of your bigger names with the advantage of utilizing, options. So I definitely feel a lot more comfortable. I know I started first doing the same thing, OTC, penny stocks, and it was a struggle. A lot of manipulation there. Definitely a challenge. So when I was able to discover options being a way to still be able to trade that without having, the larger account, it definitely really started to fall into place for me, because you just don't, it's hard to pump and dump Apple. You got to be a big timer. And even a big timer. Yep. Like Warren Buffett has to be running a Discord to be able to pump Apple, right? Like you can't front run that. You're not going to be able to get in front of that. Same thing with like your SPY and your Q. It just you can actually trade your technicals around that, and you can trade your setups a little bit better than finding out some big. You've got Mr. Morrison on whatever stock. So options flow. And really why it is important, because of that advantage that, options before current day, back in the day, was primarily just used to hedge larger portfolios. So as you were going into an ER event, you'd have some put positioning just to protect portfolio going into that event, or some insurance. And that was primarily as it was used. It wasn't really leveraged in the same way as, we utilize it today. And with that being said, you have so much more volume occurring in the options market that it is really something that you do need to pay attention to, because you also have market makers on the other side of those trades. And when you start to look at that bigger money positioning, and I'm talking about millions, I'm not talking about that spec flow that is 10,000, there's a lot of stuff that comes through the options market that's just crap. Period. Not everything, because it comes through an options flow scanner, is unusual, and that's important. And that's what I want to kind of get a little bit more into. But you have to pay attention to some of that activity just because of the amount of volume and the increase. Even I think in the last 2 years, we've nearly doubled, what is actually traded. So it's becoming a predominant vehicle, opposed to, your shares that you typically had before. It's being used by the bigger houses as well as retail, and something you need to be at least aware of. And especially if you're trading options as well, you want to have some familiarity with that.
So going off of that, what constitutes as good flow and how can you spot it? So for an example, are you looking for a specific strike or repeated option flow?
Yep. I'll grab or I have a video pinned. I'll grab that momentarily so we could put it in the nest, because I really kind of hone in. And what you really are looking for is big money. If you're really looking for flow, you're trying to find that where larger market participants are putting their money. And some days that just doesn't come, right? Some days you're going to have very little activity. It just means they're not putting money to work. So that's just as important to pay attention to, because if big money is not putting money to work, you don't want to either, right? We can catch our little day trades here and there, but you don't necessarily always get those bigger moves. So you want to be looking for activity that's coming in, same strike, same expiration. And you want to make sure that that contract price is increasing every time they come in. But let me backstep first and talk about the order types that you'll see in the options market. You will see blocks. And it's very important to understand that a block is pre-negotiated. So you have somebody else on the other side of that trade is like, I want this, but I want to pay $5.50 a contract because I'm coming with 3 million and I'm not willing to pay any more. So until you can get me at that price, I'm not taking it. So you don't have necessarily that momentum behind it. And oftentimes it could be tied to a different kind of strategy. You could also have stock replacement, which means like they're going to reduce some of their shares. They still want exposure. So they add, and go ahead and go into some options that are further dated, but they want to reduce some of their share exposure or vice versa. And then you'll see sweeps, and sweep orders are kind of like a market order in the options world that's saying, get me in. And it goes across several boards, several exchanges to complete that fill. And when you start to see aggressive activity that's coming in on the ask, above the ask, in sweep orders, that's where you tend to see some of that momentum come into the trade. So if you were reviewing options flow, do not just look at only solo blocks, because you don't have any of that momentum there that's going to help to drive that. Sweeps and blocks are okay, but I see a lot of people that only tunnel vision into multi-million-dollar blocks, but what they're not understanding is that there's could be in a different attachment, and that was also pre-negotiated. So they're trying to follow block order, and they're not getting the same reaction that you would see maybe if you had aggressive sweep orders coming in, to where they're like, get me in now, and I'm paying up. And okay, so the contract price just moved 25 cents. I still want some. It just went another 30 cents. I still want some. And that was kind of the situation that we saw before. I think it was the Thursday before that Elon news. They just hit that board and ran over it with a whole bunch of sweeper activity. And I think they started paying $1.10 and went all the way up to almost like $1.80. And they hit that with so many orders and were relentless. They still wanted in, even though they weren't even getting that $1.10 pricing because they were sweeping it. Now think about that. A market maker on the other side, you start sweeping the book. There's interest, your IV starts to increase, your spread starts to widen out. And by default, you're that there's interest in that line now, that strike and expiration. You start to see that IV increase, and that pricing starts to increase. And then the underlining, because you've got a market maker on the other side who's having to stay neutral by buying shares, you've got that momentum that will come in. So when you see aggressive type options flow, that kind of money can shift what an underlying is doing because there's now interest that wasn't there before. And so when you're flow trading, you're able to kind of see that firsthand and respond to that. You're not waiting for a MACD to turn over, which is lagging, right? It's not your price action because that's happening right then. You're not waiting for like your 8 to cross through your 5th, whatever. Yeah, what I'm trying to say, but you're seeing where it is changing because something is happening, and to kind of be able to have access to that and have information about that really helps you be able to see firsthand where you get those shifts and changes. Because sometimes don't you look at a stock and you're like, what the hell is there news? Is there news? And everybody's trying to find news. But what some people are missing, that could have just gotten hit by multi-million-dollar options flow. And that is what's shifting it, because now there's interest that wasn't necessarily there before. And you can see that increase and that momentum start to come into the stock.
I think makes perfect sense. Just to touch on real quick, sorry, Zeus, but some of the interesting things you're talking about flow that caught my attention was just the fact that this is simply also price action, that you're looking at books getting sweeped and you're looking at sweeper action and stuff like that. But my main question, or kind of a follow-up to that then, would be when you're looking at flow and you're looking at your price action on the charts and things like that, how do you keep it all together? Because the guys in AdX will tell you, like, I've only been looking at flow for like the last 3 days. And just by looking at price action on the chart, like that's enough information for me. Then I started to try and add flow, and I'm like, wait, there's so much information coming through. Like, how do you keep it all straight? How do you keep it all together?
I'm opposite. So we're a lot of people are already, they're looking at just charts. And they may have a grid that has like what their day is planned as. I'm watching options flow. And trust me, it is a mother. It is when the market opens, a fire hose coming at you. But it's time in the seat, right? Like, so regardless of, what your calling is, what you're good at, you're focusing on that every day because you can be repeatable with that, right? So I don't want to lie and say that it's not overwhelming. So OG, don't feel like you're just like, am I not getting it? No, it is a lot of information. But it's something that, I've had time in the seat with. And so I like have a trained eye, just like if I had a question with Strat, I'd be coming to y'all. Right. And it would just be something that you have to kind of keep going with and train yourself with and find that repetition over and over and over again. So one way would maybe be to filter some of your information so that you're getting rid of some of the crap. And by crap, I mean 10,000 into Lucid weeklies. That's nothing. That's a flea on a Yeti. Okay. That's not flow. Just because it came through a scanner does not make that unusual. That's not the way this works. Because that could have been AdX in the room trying to you know what I mean? Like really think about
probably.
that, right?
He's moving lucid. He's moving lucid. Watch out.
Yeah. So we got to think about, how that kind of all comes into context. And so I just really, anybody that's listening and that is, hearing stuff of flow, be very skeptical of that. Like if somebody's going, oh, there's $15,000 that just came into Workhorse. It's not the money like flow that you'd really be looking for. So like, let's kind of backtrack to something that we saw last week. What was it? It would have been Wednesday or Thursday, Nike. So we had a little bit of a gap up, and those gaps don't always hold, right? And then we're about 10 minutes into the market, and we see like 6 million dropped on Nike for the 916 125s. And you had a little bit of a pullback, and they just were relentless. They just didn't stop. And so when you talk about that money, there was over 12.58 million into that strike and expiration. And regardless of what the market was doing, that stock just kept going. And it kind of helped to pull some of the, like the sector with it. Some of your retail names really started to kind of move off of that as well. But you had positioning coming in, and that is money flow. That's absolute, size. And Nike doesn't see activity every day. So it kind of goes and rolls into what do you see every day versus what is actually coming through that's unusual. Every time I do a spaces or anybody wants to ask me about money flow, it's always, what about Tesla? Tesla is the most heavily traded stock in options. What can I possibly gain by watching Tesla options? So I mean that I don't even look at Tesla flow because of how heavily traded they are trading Tesla with options, just like you and I are. So where you may have 500,000 hit into weekly, which is again, nothing for Tesla. They may flip that in 2 hours once they get a 15-point move, which Tesla can do easily, right? So if you are not, I just don't find the edge there. I prefer to look for
I just
more.
Don't trade Tesla.
I don't either. Like, so the flow that I do not watch, that I omit, I do not watch Apple flow. And I do not watch Tesla flow because first, they're one of the most heavily traded stocks in general. Secondly, they will flip options all day long. And what most people are not seeing is, yes, we can see them come in, and yes, we can see them come out. So where you may have positioning, and this is important too, and it's, I won't do a lot of pitching, but I will say this. This is what I like most about the options flow with Black Box Stocks, because we're showing you all of the activity. We are not filtering anything. We leave that to you to do. If you are following them in, you want to know when they're exiting. So the last thing that you want to do is be holding on to some contracts because you saw somebody come and lay some wood into whatever, $10 million, and hold on to that and not realize that they got out 5 days ago. And then the stock's just dropping. You're like, oh, no, I'm following this like flow. And there's like $10 million in. They reposition. They just do, or, you'll start to see them scale out, and that's something that most don't realize, that yes, you can see them come in, and it's just as important to be able to see when they exit. So kind of something to keep in mind. In this environment, it's not a swing environment. So I'm taking and day trading, and it's a great opportunity to catch some of that momentum. And let me just get this out right now. The last thing that you want to do is follow options flow that's being ponytail pumped on CNBC halftime. No. Do not do that. Okay. They got in earlier, and that is a reason to sell into, because the last thing that you want to do is hear it secondhand.
I thought Jim Cramer knows what happens before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, like, the talking heads, y'all know better, because if you're following price action, that's not even anything you're looking at, and the last thing you're doing is asking ADEX and Discord chat. Well, Kramer just said that's not how y'all follow price action. So I think we're all on the same page here.
I'm selling as soon as they say Kramer just said, "Oh, get out."
Yep. Yes. An indicator like none other. I mean,
exactly.
If we can get CNBC to do markets in turmoil, like, we'll be finding all the other setups.
That's so true.
So Mel, I have a question. What filters do you use to create a high probable trade?
I don't use filters on options flow. I'm comfortable with the fire hose coming at me. I'm looking for names that I don't typically see. And I do, from a strat perspective, that's something that I do nightly, is I took take a look at inside days. I know my inside weeks as well, and like to be able to see if there's any kind of theme as far as like an industry group or a sector. And that's kind of stuff that I'll look and start focusing on if I see in flow. And that's kind of the way I also utilize dark pool. So we haven't really gotten to touch on that. So that would kind of answer some of those questions as well. So I don't keep any filters open. I'm looking for the price action, and for me, price action is the money flow, the what's coming in, and that could be something that's like a quicker day trade. But I'm looking for that repeat activity, same strike, same expiration, contract price going up. Preferably with time, but if not, it will create momentum trade. It's not something that I'll be sticking around if they're sweeping weekly options, but definitely does tend to bring some momentum into a stock. Preferably that something that has a little bit more time and size, because it means that you've got somebody actually setting up a position. It's just going to be dependent on kind of some of the additional information that will come through.
Yeah. So you want to see, all that aggression coming in.
Yep. And if it's something, if it's something that's coming into weeklies, that's a day trade and a scalp. I'm not sticking around. I don't, because while that momentum's coming in, you can get that upside move, but you can fade that move quick once those options stop sweeping in, right? And ultimately where that goes after that, I'm not worried about, like, if it's something into weekly options, I'm not marrying that, right? Like that's if they're sweeping into some weeklies and there's some repeats, and let's say they just hit it, 15 times with $15,000 to $20,000, there's going to be momentum that's going to come into that stock. I will take that as a scalp and a day trade all day long, but I'm not sticking around till Friday to have my options go to zero just because somebody was sweeping it on a Tuesday. I'll take those as some day trades. But that Nike, when you have almost 12 million, and actually, Nike didn't really pull back. I mean, I kept looking at that stock going like, damn, that's one of the few that's not making lower lows, while the whole rest of the market is just like puking on Friday. So, that's one. What I'm doing in that setup is I'm watching to see if they're exiting, and they haven't gotten out of that position. They haven't closed out of any of that.
And you said the expiration date for those Nikes were 9/16, correct?
125s.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, how do you know? Because when you see repeated flow coming in for like an expiration that's far out of date, when are you going to see, like, when do you know if the underlying is going to move like at that moment, or whether it's going to be a week later? Because I think for like the Twitter example, there was repeated flow for Twitter, but it didn't actually move. The big move didn't come until like a week afterwards. So how can you look at flow and see like, okay, these are long dated expirations, but know that, okay, the move can happen now?
Okay. So kind of how it comes in, but I do want to hindsight that those Twitters, if you were originally watching, they hit that. There was so much flow there. I'll share a video where we go over that, but those contracts in and of itself, they hit at 110, and just the IV itself juiced those options. So you didn't even necessarily get as big of a price discovery move to the upside as much as you just had IV juice, which by default took those contracts from 110, and you got a little pump there. But as far as the underlying moving, but those contracts, just because of that activity intraday in an hour and a half, 2 hours, moved from like 110 to 180. So from a scalping perspective, day trade perspective, there was even just that opportunity to kind of trade just with that juice that kind of came into those. And juice, I mean, the IV increasing. That's going to be situational, because I will tell you, I like to follow when they're in. And if you still have big money in, I'm okay with that contract price moving around. What's difficult for retail is because often when you have like Nike the other day, where you have like almost, you have $12.5 million coming into a contract. And then the next day you go inside day, and those are not like, that didn't just completely spur momentum the next day to have that running. Retail goes like, oh, why am I even following options? This doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. But they're still in. So it's going to be based off of how you trade. And I'm a money flow trader. And so if I'm following what I feel is the right flow in, I'm okay sitting with that as long as I know that they're still in. Because somebody didn't just come up at $12.5 million down in Nike just because. You don't see Nike with that.
And so, and in contrast to the Twitter example, for every single case, you may not see the underlying move. You could just see the contracts get juiced, but nothing in the underlying, correct?
Yeah. And you did have a jump that day.
Mm-hmm.
You did have
did.
a jump. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And even the next day you had a little bit, but I think you kind of went quiet and it didn't continue. And so I know a lot of people in our group got out and they locked in 20%. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you don't know you can't think like that. You can't think about what was missed. You got to take, especially in this market environment, what is right here in front of your face. And at the end of the day, if you're green, there's nothing that you like. You can't be upset that you missed, part of that bigger move, because the last thing that you want to do is to be holding on to something just because you missed one thing, and end up just going to zero on contracts. That's not in this environment. No.
So if you are like, for example, if you took that Nike example, right, and they have that 916 and like you get, 20-25% within like a week or two, and then it let's say that they're still in, but those contracts themselves start going down due to other things going on externally. So like, do you just wait completely until the big money is completely out, or do you guys have stop losses?
Scaling. I'm scaling. And if I'm taking that, which I took some of that the same day, and I'm reduced position size, I'm not swinging full size. But actually what's interesting is a lot of times I'll keep those on my watch list and I'll look for a setup to where I can get in cheaper if they're still in and add. But I scale out on those. I'm taking that if I've got money right in front of my face, because those contracts move $220 that same day. I was out and took some of that. I'm swinging smaller size. I think I've got like 2 contracts, but I'm monitoring that, and we'll actually look to see if there's an opportunity to get back in at cheaper if they're still in.
Thank you. I also heard you mention the terms like sweeps and blocks. Which of the two carry a bigger weight and flow?
Sweeps. Okay, so I'm going to actually, let me grab this because this is going to be really important. And I do want to make sure, and even just don't need to be part of Black Box. This is the reason that we put this together, was because it is just so important. And it's 30 minutes. We were trying to jam pack a lot of information in. But this is really important because you can take this, with you. It's sweeps. So the last thing that you want to do, and this is what I see this all the time. Mel, there's a $6 million block on Tesla. Did you see that? And I'm like, there's no sweepers with it. But it's $6 million. Okay. They bedazzled that. Stop looking. Not all that glitters is gold. Okay. That's extremely important, because what you missed was that there was also some dark pool attached to that, which would suggest that you've got some stock replacement, larger strategy. Don't just only hone in. You've got to understand a little bit more the dynamics. A block is pre-negotiated. Somebody on the opposite side of that trade is going to a house and says, I want $6 million into this strike and expiration, but I am not paying you any more than $16 for that. And they could have been sitting there for 4 days to get that $16 fill for their $6 million on that block. Okay, now let me tell you about the different side of that trade, to where somebody just got inside information on something and goes, I just am sweeping $1 million into the 5, 6, 900s, and I'm going to sweep another $1 million. I paid 15 for that. I'm sweeping another million. I'm going to pay 16 because it just got juiced because of trying to just get a fill. They sweep another order for 500,000 and they're now paying 1650. They sweep another order and they just hit for 1 million and they're paying now, 1775, and they don't care. They want in, and they want in now. And so that contract price that they're sweeping went from 16 to try to get that fill. They're throwing a market maker on the other side off and said, get me in and get me in and get me in and get me in. And what they paid 16, they still wanted all the way up to 1775 versus somebody who says, get me that for 16. I'm not doing anything more.
Real quick to kind of ask, because I've seen a lot of different types, and you're talking about sweeps and blocks, but then I've also seen like in other flow, other flow, what do you call them, platforms, a split. Is a split the same as a sweep? It's just in whatever, wherever they could get filled from whatever market, or what's the difference there between a split and a sweep?
I'm not really going to be able to answer that. I know we pay for our data. So when we put it onto the system, we're trying to take all those orders. And so I want to kind of give you an idea of like, so it's splitting it, but how that actually fills on the exchange, it would probably be something that we would show just as a sweep because of how it actually came through the platform. So remember, like a block is just that single order that gets filled just that way. I would have to assume that a split is going to be fall under that category of sweep in the sense that it's going across multiple exchanges to satisfy that one order.
Thank you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So usually when I see a flow, and I'm not sure how to determine it, but I see the size of it and it creates some kind of FOMO in me. How do you decide your entry on those? Because there's times where, I FOMO and I hit the, I buy it, and then before I know it, I'm down like 10, 15%. How do you decide when to enter? Yeah.
Yeah. So repeat activity will be part of that. So if it's something that is coming through and they're just being relentless versus one order is going to be a little bit of a difference. But you do typically have that retrace. And if they're still actively in that, depending on time as well. So on something that's not as heavily traded, even just one order will take and just jump that whole chain, right? So let's think of something like a Skechers or something, right? Like that one typically doesn't even see much options flow in general. So even one sweeper can create that increase. And sometimes if you miss it, you miss it. It doesn't always necessarily mean that move's going to continue, but because now you're hitting that chain with some unusual volume, you've increased contracts all over just by the pure IV jump. Sometimes I just miss the move. I'm okay with it, I guess.
So your entries are mainly focused on the repeated activity that's coming in. Do you ever just go into the actual chart and see if, do you use any other indicators that you would add to that? Or is it the moment you see this repeated activity, that, there's some kind of potential catalyst up ahead?
Oh, no. I'm usually, unless it's very rare that there is something occurring in flow that I just don't even look at a chart. So I want to be clear. It's not always just that, but there's just a list of names that you have built through the years that, when that sees flow, you just go. It's always worked, like Lulu. But that's experience and time in the seat with eyes. I don't want to make that seem like just jump on everything. Absolutely not. More than often than not, what I'm doing is looking at that chart and I'm trying to get a feel for even what that daily looks like. Are they coming in an area of support? Is there a catalyst? Are there earnings? And I'm not messing around with ER. I don't trade ERs. I'll catch an ER run up or run down, but that's not something I'm holding through. And I want to spend a little more time with this because, guys, with the cherry picking, I swear. I don't do it. I don't do it. No, I don't do it. I'm as real as they get, and I don't care. I'm not trying to. Yes, I am a moderated black box stocks. The last thing that I'm going to do is to try to show you, guys, look, this guy just made this. He knew it because of flow, because that is dangerous and the wrong way to use flow. ERs, guys, don't do it. Let me tell you.
You're speaking my language. You're speaking my language.
Let me tell you.
I think the biggest takeaway from the things that you just said is the fact that you're so familiar with it because you had time in the seat. That's the whole thing. This isn't like the magical formula that's going to get you a huge leg up on the market. It's going to help in one way or another if you're willing to put in the work. First of all, just like with the strat gives you the blueprint of when to take your trades based off of price action. You already said you like looking at tickers that are inside days. So those underlyings that are inside days show some consolidation. It's definitely going to go one direction or the other, like it does with any type of setup. But with the inside setups, and then you see some flow coming in, you're already prepared for it. But you've had time behind the screen, time in the seat. This isn't. I mean, this is a profession, and that's one of the things I'll be talking about later tonight. But the simple fact that if you're a pilot, you're going to have time behind a simulator to be able to actually fly passengers. This is almost the same thing where you're sitting here looking at screens day in and day out and looking at flow, and like you could take that fire hose to the face because you practiced so much with all the information coming at you that you can decipher what you like and what you don't like. That I think you hit it right on the head with, you're not going to blow smoke towards anybody, and you're not going to say that this is the ultimate way to be able to do it, but you practice long enough, you're going to get good at it, and I applaud you for that.
Absolutely. And so I'm not trying to smoke a mirror or anything. I think it is something that you do want to be familiar with and aware of, just because of how increased volume and how much volume is traded on the options market, to where it can impact individual tickers just because of the volume that's being traded or what ends up coming through that's a bit unusual. It's something you want to familiarize yourself with. But absolutely. And so we haven't touched on too much about dark pools. So I wanted to kind of add that in as another element and just kind of make sure I'm giving a background and kind of demystifying some things, because that in and of itself sounds pretty ominous, right? Like, ooh, dark pool, what happened? What's going on? No. Okay. So you do not know the intent of a dark pool trade. And so I'm going to tell you that there are a lot of people that will sell you snake oil. Don't do it. So, and I share a lot of stuff, on my feed, and really do try to, because I have a good eye and have been sitting with it so long, to kind of go like, hey, pay attention here. Something's unusual. I don't just put shit up there just to flash tickers and get likes. That's not what I'm doing. I really do try to have a dedicated feed. So with that being said, a step back for those that are not familiar, a dark pool is just a private exchange. And so that's going to be in contrast to what you and I trade on a lit market. And the biggest difference being that the lit market has the open order book, and that's your level 2. So I'm sure you've heard people say there's a wall there because they're looking at level 2 and they're seeing a large order already in the book, right? So let's take that a step further. So that's going to be your biggest difference. Now, a dark pool exchange is a private exchange used by larger market participants. What makes it dark is there's no open order book. However, they are heavily regulated. They still have to follow SEC guidelines. Trades that are facilitated on a dark pool exchange must still be recorded to the tape, and that's going to be your time and sales. And so we're seeing those orders when they're being recorded. And let's go through some misunderstandings or some common questions. Why even look at it? for every buyer, there's a seller. And that's true. But what most people don't realize is that order only has to be posted once it's been satisfied. And that does not mean that I'm trying to sell 1 million shares and Buffett comes up to me and says, I'll buy those 1 million shares. Not all those trades are facilitated on a one-to-one basis, opposed to being fulfilled by multiple orders that could go hit several buy-side, sell-side desks to satisfy that order. And that only has to be recorded once that's complete. And that's when it goes and records to the time and sales. There is nothing about that order coming over to the time and sales because it's not pulling liquidity from the open auction. It's not pulling liquidity from the lit market. So some people will tell you, that, well, did it fill on the ask or the bid? They don't understand what's actually taking place. The order must still be recorded to the time and sales. That's like a function of the market. So think of your time and sales like an accounting record for an underlining. Everything has to be recorded. All volume must be recorded, to the time and sales. And so that's why we get to see that order.
So in relation to dark pool, can you cover how to identify which prints can carry more significance than others? And I see a lot of new traders as well kind of like immediately jump in on dark pool prints and they don't really know if it's a buy or a sell.
Nope. And you don't. The purpose. Okay. So I really want to make sure this is absolutely clear. And I don't know what the hell they're doing. Absolutely not. That's the reason they're trading on a dark pool exchange, is to conceal that intent of that trade. Otherwise, they would just go post up on the lit market, right? I want to kind of backtrack, and Zeus, not to sidestep your question, but I want to backtrack a little bit to kind of give you and understand the larger orders that come in, and the reason that like the dark pool exchanges even came about was to facilitate larger orders without disrupting the market. Do you guys remember when, I don't want to say the firm name, Archios, like when it was DISCA, VIAV, and that day that all those funds, like all those names that they were unloading on the lit market. And what did that do? The moment they posted on your time or on the open order book, everybody ran. So that's what kind of chaos you would have if you had larger market participants trying to enter or exit orders. As soon as somebody'd see or get wind of like what their intent of that trade was, you'd have absolute chaos. Do y'all remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. So that's kind of an idea and a feel for what that looks like when you've got, now, of course, there was the whole, everything else going on around that exasperated it. So I don't want to kind of make it seem like, just because Buffett got out of 1 million shares, but imagine that, like, if you had, 10 million shares sitting on the bid on Apple, and you're a tape reader and you're looking at the open order book, what do you think happens to that stock? Like a mass exodus, because everybody just pulls their orders that are sitting on the buy side, sitting on the ask, and they're shorting it. So I say that mainly because with that quote rise of retail, and you're right, Zeus, like dark pool, everybody's using that term, and what's really unfortunate is that it's misunderstood to start with, and that the bigger component is not understood. And with that rise of retail, poor me retail trader, they're trading on a dark pool and we don't have that advantage. That's not correct, because if you read tape, you can see those orders and they will show on your time and sales. I guess that's why I like what Black Box offers as far as the dedicated dark pool feed, because I may not be looking at that specific ticker, but I still have insight to everything that's being traded. So I wanted to kind of just give some lay of the land, because there is a lot of misinformation. And I think the biggest takeaways that anybody can have is that in and of itself, it is a private exchange to facilitate larger orders. You do not know the intent. And another big misunderstanding that I get is, and this always makes me giggle. The volume bar was red. It was a sell. Okay, homeboy, you're looking at Apple. And this is a world of high frequency trading. How many orders do you think just went off in a minute? And that one volume bar is telling you what that one order did when there was how many that happened in 1 minute on Apple. So again, that's not going to tell you either, just in general. And so personally, how I use that is as additional areas of support and resistance. Is price accepting? What you have to think about now is there's new information. So Zeus, this will kind of help to answer that question. There is now new information being introduced to the rest of the market participants. And essentially where that stock goes is in reaction to, that new information. As far as identifying names that may carry more weight, it is, again, kind of going back to what, OG was saying. It's time in the seat. I've sat in front of these scanners for a long time, and it's looking at what don't you see every day. I also do a lot of top down. For example, we had over 2 million in the IHI, which is your medical devices, and you never see that. Even that print in and of itself was almost like 325% of 30-day average volume. So what I do is I go look at the underlying and get an idea of what names are the top weightings there. I'm looking at flow to see if there's anything there that would give me an indication of, heavy put side, heavy call side. I'm looking at those charts. Does that look like that's coming in at an area of support? I'm going through some of the top holdings and working, down from there. But what I prefer to look for, and it's going to be the same thing. I shrug off, what comes in on Apple because we see Apple every day. Apple trades almost over 70 million shares a day. Me looking at 150,000 share dark pool print is a flea on a Yeti. That's bubblegum and doesn't make a difference. It's getting a little bit familiar with what you know on your tickers. I also really, really like to look at themes. So, when you start to see a whole bunch of the EV names, like when you start to see Lucid and Rivian and LI and XPEV, and you're seeing them all come in the same day, like that has me a little bit more alert to start watching some options flow. And so it really is this like marriage of putting everything together. But it's something I've spent a lot of time with, and it takes a little time. It takes a little time for sure.
Yeah. You just touched on a subject that stratters use all the time that Rob Smith always talks about with simultaneous breaks. You want to know when a sector is moving and they're going to move together. So when you see something like the EVs moving together, you're going to see it. And then when you have a simultaneous break and it is in full time frame continuity and it's the perfect setup, then hit it and get it every single time. That's awesome.
And that's what I love the most, is just the little shifts, because I feel like I get a little bit of firsthand insight by being able to see some of the activity that occurs on a dark pool. And so why I want to say that is because not everybody looks at the dark pool activity, because again, it's dark. Like you can still see it on a time and sales, but as far as being able to have that insight to all the different names that are coming through, to be able to identify some of those shifts to where you could have sector rotation or industry type rotations, I feel like I have that advantage with the dark pool feed that we have with Black Box Stocks. And it's knowing that something unusual is happening because you just got hit with 4 or 5 of the bigger holdings in the XLE or the XLP, or, and you're also seeing some dark pool activity within that, that same sector. So super important. And there's nothing that I could look at that and go, that's a buy, that's a sell. Let me tell you, the last thing that I'm trying to do is to figure out the fucking markets. It's a waste of time. Okay. It's a waste of time. All I can do is take all the additional information and look at the charts and see, if this happens, this happens. If this happens, that happens, and set myself up with that, because I don't want to make it seem like there's anything that you can just automatically take away. And I think the biggest thing that people try to do is figure out, is that a buy or a sell? And that's the last thing I'm trying to do. I'm trying to look at the overall picture and see, like, is this an area where larger money would be coming in? And if it's the top tick and you're at exhaustion, it's not. I'm telling you, it's not. Right. And so that's something that, like, I also take from the strat, is just like where you have, and broadening formations. Like that's something that's like newer. I'm definitely getting an eye for better, but like you've got to take a look and kind of think like a larger market participant. And I will tell you, in semis, and I posted it, I think like several months ago, we got hit with every semi name with dark pool activity one night. It was just a whole, and I'd never seen anything like it before. Like all the size that came into all the semis, not only your big ones like AMD, Nvidia, and this was when we were at the top. They came to everyone, and I was like, wow, this is an interesting place to really start putting money to work when you're at the very top. And just kind of having that additional insight was like, okay, what am I starting to see in the chart? Are we breaking some levels that are pretty important? What are we seeing in flow? And you have had, this bigger pullback, in that space, and a very important space for the market, because semis tend to lead. So when you start to see some information like that, that's definitely really telling, and you can kind of put that all together.
Wow, thank you so much for that information, Mel. That really just blew my mind. I know, like, you only have a couple of minutes with us. You only have an hour, but that actually leads to the last question, this perfect segue. When it does come to like looking at flow and looking at flow specifically for sector rotation, are we looking at the names and the specific holdings to see where we can possibly see money go out of or into sectors, or can we see it within the actual ETF itself, like an XLK, XLC, or like, because I know you didn't mention how you saw that the IHI ETF, and then that you wanted to see within the medical holdings within there.
Okay, so perfect. Okay, so I want to, I shared the first video that Charlie and I did in the Nest. I do want to take and share this second one, because interestingly enough, and I'll stick around for a few minutes because this is a great question. Let me just take this and get this shared. So what did we see in this market environment? We saw where tech was definitely lagging, but we had a flight to XOP, XME, XLV, XLU. And so you can't really necessarily say that the market's necessarily deteriorating, because if you've been around for a while, like a lot of the selling has been orderly, and it hasn't really been that like capitulation, right? Because we're not going to capitulate and still have like, all these sectors outperforming. What was so unusual, and it wasn't this last week, it was the week before, and I like to look at all the activity. I do split myself up to where I have one screen that just has stocks and another screen that just has the ETFs, so that I can kind of get that macro view, but then with all the information that comes in equities, I can kind of split that. What was really interesting was to see the size come through and put flow into the first off, the EEM, which that kind of was like, ooh, are we having something globally happening? You don't typically see that. But then we started to see put flow in the XME, the XOP, the XLV, and the XLP. And that was all of your sectors. Now, mind you, I'm kind of talking about some hindsight to kind of be able to answer that question, but those were all the sectors that were leading. And now you're starting to see even your strength not be able to hold up. And that's kind of where everybody's been trying to hide, and has been our flight to safety, right? So when I start to see that kind of flow come in, and the XOP was like 5.4 million, and they haven't exited that position. And so I'm looking at those charts, and you had a lot of exhaustion there. You had really toppy charts in a lot of your oil and gas names. as well as the XME, a lot of your metals, you really had some exhaustion coming in through some of those setups. So interestingly enough, like there's not even that flight to where there's typically been strength. And you've got to think about a lot of overcrowding in some of those names as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that analysis. I appreciate that. I know you said you didn't want to plug your service, but what separates Black Box from other flow and dark pool softwares or algorithms, would you say?
I know for me personally, I need to be able to see all of the information. And unfortunately, and I don't know why, I don't know if other sites don't actually pay for the data, if they're getting it secondhand. You're not able to always see all the information. They're filtrating some of that. And that is really important. And why that's important is because if you see a position open, you want to be able to see when they exit, especially if you're following that trade. You want to be able to see what's coming through between the spread. And more importantly, in this environment, it is extreme. Okay, this is going to take me on something else real quick. So when you have a VIX this high, you do not see firms coming in and going into calls or puts like they normally would, right? Or especially calls. You're not seeing money flow being put to work in calls because the IV is so inflated and so high. The VIX is too high. So what are they doing? They're writing options to collect premium. And most retail traders don't understand the other side or the other advantage of the options market. But right now is not a directional game. It is a writing game to collect that premium. So if your service is not showing you bid side activity, you're not seeing where they're writing flow, which can be just as impactful or important. And this is something that most people haven't heard of before. Bullish put activity, meaning they're coming in on the bid to write premium. The last thing that you want to be doing is buying those contracts. They're writing to collect that premium, and they're taking advantage of a high VIX environment. That's what big funds and firms do.
I was just talking to this last week, and I think the week before as well in the AdX group, because I'd been telling a lot of people, I'm more of a futures trader. Options I do for fun, but when I do, play options, it's always, if it's a high IV environment, I'm always selling contracts. Because then the implied volatility, once it condenses or once you get that IV crushed, then you're just collecting that premium. And then you want to be buying calls when the IV is low. Because then you'll get that, what would you call it, juice?
The juice, yeah, when it juices.
The juice, yeah, when it juices, then you get to drink some of that. But it's something that not a lot of retail traders do because they're afraid of getting exercised in their options. But I don't hold them through expiration. I just I sell my contract, wait for the IV to consolidate. Even if the underlying is moving up, when the IV consolidates, you're still collecting on premium. So it's a win-win when you learn how to play that other side of the option.
Absolutely. And that brings me to one other thing, and I'll probably leave it on this. High OI is not a reason to buy. And that's something that, I've gotten from my mentor. And what we mean by that is just because there are contracts, let's say you're trading something in your retail, and you're like, ooh, these are super cheap, and there's 15,000 in OI. Do you know if they wrote those or if they bought those? You do not want to be buying contracts that somebody else is writing. Their intent is to go to zero so that other person can collect that premium. So really important to add that into your arsenal, that you put a little bit more discipline into not just looking at the open interest that's in a chain, but you're understanding what is making that up so that you're not on the wrong side of that trade.
Thank you so much, Money Flow Mel. We appreciate all the knowledge and the information that you've given to us. I'm pretty sure everyone is just like mind blown on the new knowledge that they've just gained. So we appreciate that. Thank you. I know people do have some questions. We do have some requests, but I know that you do have to go.
You know what, ADEX, I got about another 20 minutes if you want to open up to some questions.
Oh, sure. Okay. Thank you. We appreciate that. All right. If that's the case, then I will have some people come up and ask some questions. E-Money will have you first, and then Tahoe Sam, I'll have you come in next. Let me add you as a speaker, E-Money. Thank you so much, Money Mel. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right. You should be connecting now. Feel free to ask your question. E-Money, feel free. I guess
we almost had it.
Almost had it.
Well, in the meantime, while you're getting people on there, it's crazy when we start talking about trading, because we thought we were going to be here for an hour, and then Mel's gracing us with another 20 minutes. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. But when we start talking about it, we start going, and it's fun. But I think you got somebody now, or
yes,
still waiting on somebody?
Sam, feel free to ask your question.
Hey, cool. Thanks a lot. Mel, appreciate your time and appreciate the transparency you speak with. It's really refreshing. I was just trying to follow, I hopped in a little bit late, but I was trying to follow the IHI, and I found that print. I use Whalestream. And yeah, like that print stands out because I can track back 2 or 3 years, and there's nothing that even comes close to that size on the print. And then I can pull up the chart, the yearly, and that looks like it's a support level that's been touched, I believe 5 times before that print in the last year. So without trying to guess direction, what's the best way to try to utilize that information?
I am so sorry. 1 second. My son is needing something. I apologize, Tahoe. 1 second.
Oh, it's all good.
1 second.
No, he takes priority.
Family, kids, they always get in the way. No, I'm just kidding. I've got 6 daughters of my own, and they're all probably scratching at the door right now, waiting for me to get off this thing. But
I thought you said an hour, Dad.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. All right, here's you.
I'm so sorry. So what I was looking at, first thing, one of the things that I looked at when that came in, TMO had not reported yet. And TMO was a larger weighting of that. And the IHI in and of itself, you kind of have this Darvis box. I know that's not necessarily, what Stratters are using, but let me go to the monthly to kind of see. You really didn't know. You had to have TMO, and then taking a look at the rest. The other bigger one I was looking at was AMGN. That was also within that, and that one had already reported. So you had a few that had already reported, and it's not necessarily that I'm looking to take action. I don't trade earnings. I was waiting for TMO to report, but I knew AMGN was one I was looking to actually get into and to short, because you do have some exhaustion there. That's kind of how I'm taking and breaking it down. But in and of itself, if you look at that daily chart, you really just have some sideways consolidation, and you're in this channel range. So you're looking for that to either break up or break down. And it's the overall general feel or look of what that technical setup looks like, because you're still within a very tight range. And it looks like we actually did break down on that of Friday. So those are definitely a few of the names that I'm looking at potentially shorting. Because I don't know that that's necessarily going to hold as a level, and we've already broken below that.
Yeah, right. I saw the same thing.
I really wanted TMO to report first because it's so heavily weighted in that being the top holding. That's kind of where I was a little reluctant, just because I knew we were going into earnings and they did already report. So you definitely had AMGN at some exhaustion, some weakness into MDT, ABT were some of those top holdings, ISRG being one of them as well. So that being a sector that doesn't look like that's going to actually hold up.
Hey, thanks so much for the question. You guys can bump me back down to listener.
Thank you so much for the question, Tahoe. Master Wu, you're a speaker. Do you have a question?
Yep. Hi, Mel. I appreciate all of your guys' stuff at Black Box. I always like the platform. One thing that I've learned that's kind of new in the, I guess the phrases here is the phantom print. One of my friends that I trade with, she like preaches how much she loves your tweets on the phantom print. And I was wondering if you could just go in a little bit about the phantom print and why you find it so valuable as well.
Ooh, great question. Love that. Okay. So a phantom print is a dark pool print that has come through the tape that is outside of the current day's range and also with a 24-hour look back into the previous day. And so what we've found before and where it was actually a few years ago, and I want to kind of start and go into this example because I think it paints a clearer picture. If you guys recall, before the SPY was even trading at that 400 level, we had never broke 400. We were trading, I think it was like 396, 397. We had a 1.2 million share dark pool print come through at 403.91. We had never even traded at that, over that 400 level, and that print never canceled. So our platform will show you, and it happens. There's fat fingers. We see that all the time. That order will cancel because remember, your time in sales is going to be an accounting record. If there's a fat finger, you'll typically see a cancel and then a reprint of the order. That order never canceled. And it was that next week where we actually had broken out and we went up to that level. I guess it's where you could say we kind of found some exhaustion, pulled back a little bit before taking another leg up. And so there's just been several examples to where we've seen this phantom print. And essentially, it's just outside of range from where we're currently trading, and it's tend to be directional or acts like a magnet to where price is going, and you just don't have a time. You don't have a time range for when that would actually be facilitated. But there's been several examples. So that is actually one of the newest features by tracking some of these orders and being able to kind of have some solid examples. We went to our programming team and asked them to go ahead and write an alert that would give us a little more insight because there's so much information that actually comes through to signal and let the system alert us to when we actually have a phantom print come through. Great question. Thank you for asking that.
So if we ever see a phantom print on SPY at 100, run for the hills.
You want to make sure there's not a cancel. So that's important first, right? Because you want to make sure that your platform, and not every platform will show you that cancel, which is really important. Our system will show that. So with some diligence, but there's the ones on the SPY and the Qs have really come into play and tend to be some signaling upside or downside. And there's been several examples that we have taken note of to be able to kind of in our own way back test that. Of course, with more information now that we have this alert, we'll be able to gather even more insight to be able to continue to build off of that.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Mel. Because I agree with you guys so much about the bigger participant, those bigger dynamical traders that can move the market. And that's I've always appreciated your perspective on the dark pool and your own individual focus on dark pool as well. So thank you.
Definitely appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Wu. Volatility Queen, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I actually had a question about the phantom prints. So, Mel, I actually saw some phantom prints come in, I think it was on the 22nd for SPY, and I actually semi-panicked because I wasn't really sure what they were. So I actually found your YouTube video, which was really helpful. But I wanted to know, I guess, if you have taken a look at those and what your take would be on those prints that actually came in, because it didn't look like they were canceled.
Do you know what the share size was on that? Were they smaller? So our system is going to give, so I want to kind of explain that too. Our system's going to be looking at dark pool activity that has at least 100,000 shares, or to be able to catch those bigger movers like Google, Amazon, it's looking for a set notional. So that's if it's lower than that, we're not catching those. So I don't know what the share size on that would be, but I don't recall seeing anything that came through that was at least 100,000 or more on the SPY. So if you wanted to send me a DM, I wouldn't mind taking a look.
Okay.
See if I can get anything else. But yeah, definitely looking to see if that canceled would be really important. I don't know what system you use, or if you're just looking at time and sales and are able to fine tune that with like your broker. But you should be able to see a cancellation like that would come in later if those were to cancel.
Okay. Yeah, I actually use Black Box too.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Volatility Queen. Appreciate that question. TSDR, my guy, how are you doing, man? I hope you're well. If you have, do you have a question?
What's up? Yes, I do. I'm curious, and I think the listeners would find it very valuable. So, Mel, my question is, could you walk us through a trade that you have taken recently or in the past that you remember where dark pool activity kind of played a key role in executing that trade, or dark pool or options activity played a key role in executing that trade, and how you used that to manage the trade throughout?
Absolutely. So I know you got on a little bit late, TSDR, but one of the things, okay, so this is actually a combo. So great question. I do talk about this XRT trade in the second video that I have in the nest. So what day was it? Monday, before Facebook reported. Am I right? Facebook reported Tuesday? Is that correct? Okay, we're going to go with that. Monday, we had, you guys heard me mentioning about some of those sectors that were showing some strength. We started to see some unusual size put activity come into the XME, XOP. XRT had about 1.6 million on Monday for the 520.71s, which was a little bit unusual because the XRT doesn't typically see that much money flow. And you had, some premium that was built up there, or it was just shy of 2 million. I think it was just shy of 2 million. And so a lot of us took that trade because it was a little bit unusual for that ETF. Tuesday, 16 minutes after the open, they came in and they closed that trade. They actually took a smaller loss, I think about 30 to 40 cents a contract. So it kind of seemed to me like that they were putting on maybe some protection prior to going into ER. So they closed out that put activity. They actually also closed out the 617.71s that had almost 3 million. And so here you have the XRT to where they had a put position, they're closing it out. And all through that day, we started to see some dark pool activity come into some of the retail names, which were actually holding up fairly well comparative to the overall market. So you had TPR, you had Macy's, and TJX. And TJX was one that had caught my eye because you were kind of in this upward channel. It was coming in at a support level. So throughout the day, some smaller stuff coming through. But Macy's and TJX after hours each caught additional size with over 1 million shares. And so what I'm doing with that is, again, I don't keep necessarily, I don't run a watch list that shows me that RSI is oversold or crossing over, or MACD is doing this or that. I'm using the information that's coming through that is like, okay, we've had several dark pool prints in retail names. We have the XRT puts closing. This is where I'm looking at those charts. I'm going to spend my time looking at these. And so that next day I had taken a trade just as a day trade for TJX, based off of that dark pool activity and it coming in at an area of support, you had some smaller spec sweepers. And by spec, I mean that you don't have a lot of money behind that came in, but you also had that acceleration that day where you had that, 10-point move in the SPY and the Qs. So was able to kind of close that out, green. That was also the same day that we had, larger size in Nike, where we had the 12.5 million. So kind of seems like there was a little bit of a retail theme building based off of some put activity closing, some larger known names getting some call flow, and then also what we had come through dark pool wise the previous day and some of the retail names that kind of was basing a theme.
Always a privilege to listen to you speak, Mel. Appreciate you. And thank you, AdX, and everyone else for what you're doing.
Great question. Appreciate it, TSDR. Great follow if you guys don't follow him. His charts are just money, just really clean, nice. Another perspective to kind of add into your mix with what you guys are looking at with the strat.
Thank you. I appreciate that greatly. Thank you.
TSDR is the man. Appreciate you for being here, my guy. Big O moves. I guess this will be the last question because I do know that Money Flow has to go. So you'll be the last one to ask your question. Feel free to speak.
Yeah, I appreciate it. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Let me give a couple of pointers for some of the new traders out there.
Did you have a question for Money Flow Mel?
Oh, no. I was just going to give some of the newer traders some tips.
Oh, okay. Well, Mel does have to leave, so we're actually going to be concluding this space.
Yeah. Let me ask her one question then.
Of course.
What would be for her? Everybody's got their own personal setup that they really like. What's yours? Like if you saw something setting up on all the time frames and stuff like that, what would be your ideal setup that you wouldn't hesitate to take every single time?
It's really, for me, it starts with money flow and then I go to the chart. So I'm looking to see if there's activity that's coming into a name. With as much that comes through, I'm able to kind of just focus on that throughout the day, and it helps me to not create a bias. So whether we're seeing some call activity or put activity or whatever may be going on, I'm going to start with money flow first, opposed to what my chart setup looks like. That's usually what's attracting me to even go and look at a chart. So that's my primary information overload every day that I'm looking at is going to be options flow and dark pool activity.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. It's a great answer.
Thank you for that question, Big O Moves.
Yes,
and that is going to be the conclusion of episode 4 of the Strat Talk with Money Flow Mel. Thank you, Mel, for taking the time out of your day to speak with us. And thank you for the additional time that you've allotted to answer questions. We really appreciate it. This was really amazing. Thank you so much. How can the audience members reach you? Or do you have any last words you'd like to say? Or tell the people that you have anything you have going on?
I'm at Melstone31 on Twitter. I share a lot, and that's kind of taking and picking apart what I'm seeing. So even if you don't use a flow service or, I do have a discount link if you're interested in actually seeing all of the activity. I do try to stay pretty honed in on what I really think is unusual or worth noting. So I do share a lot of that throughout the day. So if you're kind of just starting or dabbling, I'd say start with some of that. Otherwise, I just really want to encourage everybody to be proud of yourself if you're still making it. It's been a tough year. I think we're in a little bit, this is not the same year we traded a year ago. So you have to fluctuate. You have to adjust yourself. And whatever is attracting you in the market and whatever makes sense is what is right. It doesn't matter what is right for me or ADEX or anybody else. It's what shows you clarity in these markets. And by default, that's what you're going to be attracted to. That's what you're going to follow. And that's what you're going to hone in on. Don't deter from that. Okay. So just make sure you're staying focused on that, because there's a lot to learn, but ultimately nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We're all working through these markets with the same objective, going through it a little bit differently, feeding off of each other. And I'd love to add a little bit of the strat stuff into my own personal trading, a great community. Just make sure you're kind of staying with that. There's not a right way or wrong way to approach the market. So I think that's important, and definitely appreciate the open community that you guys have, and the supportive community that the Strat in general has, just to make sure that there's education first and foremost being pushed out, so that any new traders have something to feed off of, and appreciate you opening this up to something that's outside of just your normal strat trading, to be able to offer a little bit of insight. It's been great to be a guest on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you as our guest. Thank you. And thank you to my co-hosts of the panel as well, Abby Sai, OG, Trooper, and Zeus. Do you guys have anything you'd like to say before we all head up out of here?
I'll just quickly, sorry, Zeus, didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. No, just appreciate you, Mel. You not only gave a lot of good information about dark pool and unusual options activity that has definitely made it less scary or less confusing. So I really do appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that you have such a grounded approach to trading and giving great advice as far as newer traders not trying to dabble in too much and just kind of focus on the things that are working. Things that don't work, make sure you take out of your trading. And, just real quick, I know I wasn't going to say anything, but tonight in the Sepia group, I am going to be doing the Strat Chat at 9 p.m. I kind of posted a link up there. Sorry, Abby, you're going to laugh at me, but, the AdexTrades group has my back. The Sepia group's got my back. So if you guys have an opportunity, I know. So as long as you guys, I'm going to be talking about trade journaling, and, this kind of pumped me up for that, because Mel is right on with just about everything she was saying, and listen in, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you, my guy. Zeus, did you want to say anything?
I wanted to appreciate Mel a lot for her insight on the flow, because I've been using the flow for about 8 months, and you kind of just confirmed that I've been using it properly. So I just really want to thank you for that.
Great job, Mike.
And I just wanted to jump in and say I don't have to fangirl anymore, and I really appreciate you responding back to me. It really means a lot. I think what really stood out to me was when you were talking about how you can incorporate dark pool plus broadening formations, and I think that's going to be a huge landmine in terms of how I start approaching dark pools more in general now. And just thanks again for joining in, and it really means a lot.
Absolutely. This has been great, guys. Honored to be with you all, and hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Sunday. Let's get it this week.
Yes. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to the audience members. Strat Soldier, I see you. I want to give a shout out to you. Thank you for being here, Cyberdog. We appreciate you. Alpha Pack family, I see you all as well. And of course, the AdexTrades team, I see all of you guys. Thank you for joining us and listening into our fourth The Strat Talk. We will have this space recorded, so please feel free to listen back in. And for those of you that are interested in learning the strat, we will be having our free Basics to the Strat lesson tomorrow in our Discord. The strat is available for everyone, and we ultimately believe that everyone should be learning the strat. So we do provide a space where everyone can learn the strat. So feel free to check out our Discord. And good luck tomorrow, everyone, and have a great rest of your Sunday. Thank you for coming here for the Strat Talk, and we'll see you all later. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
God bless.